World War I saw the first large-scale use of submarines in war. The Germans launched a concerted effort to cut Britain off from supplies by sinking merchant ships around her coast. What by 1917 had become an unrestricted U-boat campaign was remarkably successful, though enacted too late to ultimately save Germany from military defeat on the Western Front. Ironically, it was the U-boat's very success that ultimately hastened Germany's defeat, as the sinkings took the lives of many neutral US citizens, and was an important factor leading to American entry into the war on the Allied side in April 1917. So how did a German U-boat end up in New York's Central Park? It's a story that begins on the other side of the Atlantic, off the coast of East Anglia on Britain's east coast, a year before. In World War I, the port of Harwich in Essex was an important naval base. On the 27th of April 1916, a German U-boat attempted to mine the approaches to the harbour in the hope of sinking Allied warships. German submarine UC-5 was a UC-1 class mine-layer submarine commissioned into the Imperial German Navy in June 1915. UC-1 class subs were small coastal U-boats. UC-5 weighed only 168 tons surfaced and had a crew of just 14 men. They were fitted with 6 internal tubes loaded with 12 magnetic mines. They did not have torpedo tubes and couldn't attack enemy shipping directly, but UC-5, for example, had been stunningly successful. Her job was to stealthily lay mines to surprise and sink Allied ships, and she had sunk 28 merchant ships and 2 warships in 29 patrols. UC-5's luck ran out on the 27th of April 1916. Oberleutnant zur See Ulrich Moorbütter was manoeuvring his submarine off the English coast, trying to approach Harwich, when he ran his U-boat aground on Shipwash Shoal, 12 miles northeast of the port. Unable to break his vessel free, Moorbütter ordered all charts and papers destroyed and prepared scuttling charges. The radio message he sent to the German submarine base at Seebrugge was intercepted by the Royal Navy. The destroyer HMS Firedrake arrived on the scene and promptly captured both the U-boat and crew. Then there were several explosions and brown smoke poured from the conning tower hatch, but the U-boat didn't sink. She was still stuck in the sand. UC-5 was the first German U-boat captured almost intact. UC-5 was carefully salvaged, put into a floating dock and towed to Harwich in Essex, then to Sheerness in Kent. She then became a tourist attraction at Temple Pier on the River Thames near the Houses of Parliament in London for 3 weeks. 200,000 people paid up to 6pence a time to view the vessel, the money going to sailors' funds. When America entered the war in April 1917, the US government began a war bonds drive to raise money to help finance the war effort. Various schemes and gimmicks were tried to encourage buyers. So-called war exhibit trains of captured enemy weapons visited some towns and cities across America to sell bonds. Those buying a $1,000 bond received a German Pickelhaube spiked helmet. Tens of thousands of these captured helmets were distributed. If 20% of a population in a town subscribed, the town received a German artillery piece to display in its local park. But for many Americans, the image they most associated with the war was the German U-boat. What about using one for a war bonds drive? The trouble was the Americans didn't have any captured U-boats. They turned to Britain for help. The UK was keen to keep the Americans happy and fighting alongside Britain and France on the Western Front. The Royal Navy gave America UC-5, first chopping it into 3 sections and shipping it to New York City. On arrival in New York City, each of the 3 sections, each of them extremely heavy, was pulled by teams of horses from 131st Street via Manhattan Street, 7th Avenue and Central Park West to the park's 66th Street entrance. The horse teams then hauled the sections into what was then called the sheep pasture, now Sheep Meadow in Central Park, and reassembled atop wooden piles into a complete U-boat. On the 25th of October 1917, Liberty Day, UC-5 was rechristened You Buy a Bond in front of a crowd of thousands. The only people permitted to go inside the submarine, apart from celebrities, were those who had purchased a Liberty Bond. It was enormously popular and was one of several such gimmicks to encourage the sale of war bonds. 20 million Americans purchased bonds before the end of the war, raising $17 billion for the US government. But there's one final mystery about this story. What happened to UC-5? Perhaps someone watching this knows the answer. The U-boat simply disappears from history at the end of the war, and I'm assuming she was scrapped. Do any relics from this boat lie forgotten in New York museums or private collections? Let me know in the comments section if you discover anything. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also help support my channel at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.